go to Jesus every day, now shagara they do. Double, heavenly blessings that him they receive.
Hi, my name is Leo Lewis, and I'd like to talk about the Interactive Whiteboard. With the older, more used pedagogy, they were mostly teacher-centered. For example, a lecture. A lecture would, of course, entail the teacher speaking to the students based on the knowledge that the lecturer possesses. This, of course, means that all information had to come from the teacher or the lecturer, and the student would be seen as someone who did not know anything. This did not allow for much engagement on the part of the student. Then there's the classic chalk and the talk. This added to the lecture in that the teacher had to write on some board, whether it's a whiteboard or blackboard, as they spoke, and try to explain whatever was written or write whatever they were explaining. Again, this was a passive form of learning, and the students were only engaged. The students were engaged at a small level. And of course, this was passive learning, or is considered to be passive learning. And students are seen as being filled with knowledge, even from that perspective.
He has taken away my sorrows and now I'm free.
Then, of course, we have activity-based pedagogies that try to get the students involved using their hands, using their brains, using their eyes, etc., in a much more active way. And thus that became more of an interactive learning scenario. This, of course, aided in getting kinesthetic learners to interact with material in a much more intimate way. And of course, we do believe in learning through interaction and through doing. The quote-unquote exciting parts of teaching and learning now comes from the integration of ICT in teaching. The great thing about this is that using computers and their added devices, such as the electronic whiteboard, is a step in a direction that allows students to interact with material on a softer level. The students might not have the opportunity to handle a circuit, but they'll use the electronic whiteboard and use the software that simulates the circuit so very well in their learning. Part of the advantage of using ICTs in learning is that the material will always exist in soft copy, and you can make so many copies of this information. You don't have to redo anything, but as a classic software engineer would say, you reuse the tool that you already have. And so this soft copy, or this move to soft copy, will truly help in ensuring that ICT can continue to be a driving force in education. So what is the electronic whiteboard or interactive whiteboard, and what is it used for? Where did it come from? The electronic whiteboard was a piece of technology that was used in commercial industries, and of course, its purpose was to get better collaboration from persons who were working on similar projects. The idea, the idea was to get each person in a room collaborating on one particular project, and each individual could come to the board and add their own kind of input to the presentation or to the project presentation. And of course, because it's being soft copied, then that information could be stored and kept for later reference. Obviously, one could see the pedagogical value in something of this sort. Getting persons to interact with the content that they're using or with the content that they need to know is a step in good pedagogical practices. And of course, the idea is to have students interacting in that very same way. So, what is the interactive whiteboard? Well, consider it as a super whiteboard that will allow for the connection of audio devices, but specifically laptops and desktops or any form of computing device that can communicate with it via VGA cords or HDMI cords. What it really does is transform these devices into a whiteboard, but with interactivity, with the ability to, with a lot of touch ability that allows you to draw things on screen or create content directly from the board and save it to the device. And thus, my idea of calling it a super whiteboard. So the important thing is collaboration and interactivity. The P21 framework speaks to the importance of technical skills or IT skills, and it also speaks to the importance of collaboration between learners and also of critical thinking. And this whiteboard helps in every single way. Because of the ability of the whiteboard to allow for multimodal information processing, it allows learners to both learn from what they hear, from what they see, and also from what they do. The whiteboard is equipped with speakers, which allows for auditory information. You can watch videos from it, meaning that you can, of course, see moving images as well as get audio from anywhere on the web, especially YouTube. You are allowed to interact with material because the software or software that comes with the board and other software on your laptop can definitely be manipulated from the board. And any user who has any form of idea as how to touch a board and move around a board will definitely have great fun and learn much where this is concerned. Research has shown that students who get involved with their learning learn better. And even more so, interacting with something like a whiteboard or electronic whiteboard gives the student an added motivation to learn. It is important to understand that this kind of learning must therefore first and foremost engage the student, and the student must be the one using the whiteboard. That is in and of itself the important thing to do. If they get to use the whiteboard, they are more willing to learn, they are more willing to go and look for information. And so in accordance with
Because of Jesus, every day na shagara they do.
problem
Double, double, heavenly blessing.
where the student themselves have to go out, get the information, answer questions that they might have, answer questions that the teacher might give, and then present that information using the whiteboard and its interactivity. In the lesson that I have done with my students, they had to create their own circuit, and they had to use the electronic whiteboard as well as the electronic workbench software, which allows you to create your own circuits and show how the circuits work. Their presentation had to be one in which they showed us, the audience, how an electronic circuit worked, and they had to touch the whiteboard and show how you flip a switch on and how you flip it off, and what happens to a gate and what happens to the information going into the gate, and it should light up a light bulb or something of that effect.
Double, double, heavenly blessing na him I dey receive. Ah, yeah. God in your grace and mercy is always the follow.
Research has shown that students who get involved with their learning learn better, and even more so, interacting with something like a whiteboard or electronic whiteboard gives the student an added motivation to learn. It is important to understand that this kind of learning must therefore first and foremost engage the student, and the student must be the one using the whiteboard. That is in and of itself the important thing to do. If they get to use the whiteboard, they are more willing to learn, they are more willing to go and look for information. And so, in accordance with interactivity, there has to be the sense of a problem-based learning where the student themselves have to go out, get the information, answer questions that they might have, answer questions that the teacher might give, and then present that information using the whiteboard and its interactivity. In the lesson that I have done with my students, they had to create their own circuit, and they had to use the electronic whiteboard as well as the electronic workbench software, which allows you to create your own circuits and show how the circuits work. Their presentation had to be one in which they showed us, the audience, how an electronic circuit worked, and they had to touch the whiteboard and show how you flip a switch on and how you flip it off, and what happens to a gate and what happens to the information going into the gate, and it should light up a light bulb or something of that effect. Given the advantages of working with the interactive whiteboard, namely interactivity, motivation, and engagement, plus the importance of the P21 framework, it was important that my students and the knowledge that they would have gained from research become the center of the lesson. It meant that they had to present a research using PowerPoint presentation, submit a Word document of the research, and show how a circuit, or in this case, decoders, multiplexers, adders, etc., would function in a computer. They had to show combinations, truth tables, etc., that would demonstrate how a truth table relates to the circuit that they have and how the circuit would function in reality. Even though they did not have the circuit before them, the fact that the whiteboard was there, they could demonstrate how the circuit would function. And because electronic workbench is interactive or shows a lot of simulation, the interactivity would bring everything to life in that you would actually see what happens when information goes into an encoder or a decoder, and what happens when it comes out, and what the truth, how the truth is able to respond when it comes out. It also meant that my role as teacher would change. Instead of being the source of information, I'd be learning from them, and I'll also be a critique of their presentation. It would also mean that I'd have a chance to allow my students to interact with me on a level that is synonymous with a work environment where collaboration has to take place. Even greater emphasis was placed on the importance of students using the whiteboard, because the majority of my class, or should I say, my class is a class of boys. And from research, it shows that boys tended to work better when they had something to handle, or when they had to interact on a physical level with the material that they have to learn. And so I thought that putting it in this form would reach them far much more than just giving them an assignment to write out, or an assignment to present a Word document. From some research, it's seen that girls tend to be the ones who are able to present information in a Word document and present it much better than men. And the flip is true. When the boys had to interact with these devices, whatever they are or whatever they were, they learned better and they got information better. They were then asked to evaluate themselves, and those boys who were seen as audience were asked to fill out a Google form that they connected to using their phone via a QR code. And I think that for the most part, they were more caught up in how the devices worked and how cool it was, more than the information at times. And that's where I had to come in as a facilitator to give them the correct focus that I thought they needed at that point in time. But generally, they were very receptive. They were motivated to participate in the lesson. I'm Leo Lewis, and thank you for watching.
Because of Jesus, every day that shagara they do. Double, double, heavenly blessings that he might receive. He has given me victory. Oh, my God has given me victory. He has given me victory. Oh. All the days of my life I praise you. Everything that I have now you gave to me, Baba. Lord, I say for your love I'm grateful. Yes, you love me plenty, you came to die for me. Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Nissi, I am that I am. Ooh, oh, I searched around, there's no one else like you. Lion of Judah, you're the man.
God has given me victory.
He has given me victory.
He has given me victory.
God has given me victory.
God has given me victory.
He has given me victory.
He has given me victory.
Hallelujah. 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 Come and see what the Lord has done for me. He has taken away my sorrows and now I'm free. I got me buru, hallelujah, buru. I got my power, hallelujah, power. Because of Jesus, every day that shakara they do. Double, heavenly blessings, now him I they receive. Ah, yeah. God, your grace and mercy is always to follow me. Yeah. He has given me victory.